only one. Oh, Madeline, for you will carry on. It's so long since we have seen a miss. Won't you give us just a kiss? But Madeline, she takes it all in fun. She laughs and says, you see it can't be done. I would like, but how can I consent when I'm true to the whole regiment?
Oh, Madeline, you are the only one.
Madeline, Madeline,
Oh, Madeline, for you will carry on.
Madeline, Madeline,
It's so long since we have seen a miss.
Madeline, Madeline,
Won't you give us just one kiss?
Madeline,
But Madeline,
Madeline,
she takes it all in fun.
Madeline, Madeline,
She laughs and says, you see it can't be done.
Madeline, Madeline,
I would like her, but how can I consent
Madeline, Madeline,
when I'm true
Madeline, Madeline,
to the whole regiment?
Madeline, we love you so. Madeline.
Winnie the Pooh. This is Edward Bear coming downstairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. And then he feels that perhaps there isn't. Anyhow, here he is at the bottom and ready to be introduced to you. Winnie the Pooh. When I first heard his name, I said, just as you're going to say, but I thought he was a boy. So did I, said Christopher Robin. Then you can't call him Winnie. I don't. But you said, he's Winnie the Pooh. Don't you know what the means? Ah, yes, now I do, I said quickly. And I hope you do too, because it's all the explanation you're going to get. Sometimes Winnie the Pooh likes a game of some sort when he comes downstairs, and sometimes he likes to sit quietly in front of the fire and listen to a story. This evening, what about a story? Said Christopher Robin. What about a story? I said. Could you very sweetly tell Winnie the Pooh one? I suppose I could, I said. So I did. Once upon a time, a very long time ago now, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest all by himself under the name of Sanders. What does under the name mean? Asked Christopher Robin. It means that he had the name over the door in gold letters and lived under it. Winnie the Pooh wasn't quite sure, said Christopher Robin. Now I am, said a growly voice. Then I will go on, said I. One day when he was out walking, he came to an open place in the middle of the forest. And in the middle of this place was a large oak tree, and from the top of the tree there came a loud buzzing noise. Winnie the Pooh sat down at the foot of the tree, put his head between his paws, and began to think. First of all, he said to himself, that buzzing noise means something. You don't get a buzzing noise like that just buzzing and buzzing without it meaning something. If there's a buzzing noise, somebody's making a buzzing noise, and the only reason for making a buzzing noise that I know of is because you're a bee. Then he thought another long time and said, and the only reason for being a bee that I know of is making honey. And then he got up and said, and the only reason for making honey is so as I can eat it. And so he began to climb the tree. He climbed and he climbed and he climbed, and as he climbed he sang a little song to himself. It went like this. Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, 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 I wonder why he does. Then he climbed a little further and a little further, and then just a little further, and by that time he thought of another song. It went like this. It's a very funny thought that if bears were bees, they'd build their nests at the bottom of trees. And that being so, if the bees were bears, we shouldn't have to climb up all these stairs. He was getting rather tired by this time, so that is why he sang a complaining song. But he went on climbing. He was nearly there now, and if he just stood on that branch, crack! "Oh, help!" said Winnie the Pooh as he dropped 10 feet onto the branch below him. "If only I hadn't," he said as he bounced 20 feet onto the next branch. "You see, what I meant to do," he explained as he turned head over heels and crashed to another branch 30 feet below. "What I meant to do, of course it was, rather," he admitted as he slithered very quickly through the next 6 branches. "It all comes, I suppose," he decided as he said goodbye to the last branch, spun round 3 times and flew gracefully into a gorse bush. "It all comes of liking honey so much. Oh, help!" He crawled out of the gorse bush, brushed the prickles from his nose and began to think again. And the first person he thought of was Christopher Robin. "Was that me?" said Christopher Robin in an awed voice, hardly daring to believe it. "That was you." Christopher said nothing, but his eyes got larger and larger and his face got pinker and pinker. So Winnie the Pooh went round to his friend Christopher Robin, who lived behind a green door in another part of the wood. "Good morning, Christopher Robin," he said. "Good morning, Winnie the Pooh," said you. "I wonder if you've got such a thing as a balloon about you." "A balloon?" "Yes, I just said to myself coming along, I wonder if Christopher Robin has such a thing as a balloon about him. I just said to myself, thinking of balloons and wondering." "What do you want a balloon for?" you said. Winnie the Pooh looked around to see that nobody was listening, put his paw to his mouth and said in a deep whisper, "Honey." "But you don't get honey with balloons." "I do," said Winnie the Pooh. "Well, it just happened that you'd been to a party the day before at the house of your friend Piglet, and you had balloons at the party. You had a big green balloon, and one of the rabbits had a big blue one, and had left it behind, being really too young to go to a party at all. And so you had brought the green one and the blue one home with you. Which one would you like?" you asked Winnie the Pooh. He put his head between his paws and thought very carefully. "It's like this," he said. "When you go after honey with a balloon, the great thing is not to let the bees know you're coming. Now, if you have a green balloon, they might think you were only part of the tree and not notice you. And if you have a blue balloon, they might think you were part of the sky and not notice you. And the question is, which is most likely?" "Wouldn't they notice you underneath the balloon?" you asked. "They might, or they might not," said Winnie the Pooh. "You never can tell with bees." He thought for a moment and said, "I shall try to look like a small black cloud. That'll deceive them." "Then you better have the blue balloon," you said, and so it was decided. Well, you both went out with a blue balloon, and you took your gun with you, as you always did when you went out, and Winnie the Pooh stopped at a very muddy place that he knew of, and rolled until he was black all over. And then, when the balloon was blown up as big, and you and Winnie the Pooh were both holding onto the string, you let go suddenly, and Winnie the Pooh floated gracefully up into the air and stayed there, just about level with the top of the tree, and about 20 feet away from it. "Hooray!" you shouted. "Isn't that fine?" shouted Winnie the Pooh down to you. "What do I look like from down there?" "You look like a bear holding on to a balloon," you said. "Not," said Winnie the Pooh anxiously, "not like a small black cloud in a blue sky?" "Not very much." "Oh, well, perhaps from up here it looks different. And as I say, you never can tell with bees." There was no wind to blow him nearer to the trees, so there he stayed. He could see the honey, he could smell the honey, but he couldn't quite reach the honey. After a little while he called down to you. "Christopher Robin," he said in a loud whisper. "Hello?" "I think the bees suspect something." "What sort of thing?" "I don't know, but something tells me that they're suspicious." "Perhaps they think you're after their honey." "It may be that. You never can tell with bees." There was another little silence, and then he called down to you again. "Christopher Robin." "Yes?" "Have you an umbrella in your house?" "I think so." "I wish you'd bring it out here and walk up and down with it and gaze up at me every now and then and say, 'Tut, tut, it looks like rain.' I think if you did that, it would help the deception which we are practicing on these bees." Well, you laughed yourself, silly old bear, but you didn't say it aloud because you were so fond of him, and you went home for your umbrella. "Oh, there you are," called down Winnie the Pooh as soon as you got back to the tree. "I was beginning to get anxious. I've discovered that bees are now definitely doubtful." "Shall I put my umbrella up?" you said. "Yes, but wait a minute. We must be practical. The important bee to deceive is the queen bee. Can you see which is the queen bee from down there?" "No." "A pity. Well, if you'll walk up and down with your umbrella saying, 'Tut, tut, it looks like rain,' I shall do what I can by singing a little cloud song, such as a cloud might sing. Go." So, while you walked up and down and wondered if it would rain, Winnie the Pooh sang this song. "How sweet to be a cloud, floating in the blue. Every little cloud always sings aloud. How sweet to be a cloud, floating in the blue. It makes him very proud to be a little cloud." The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them, indeed, left their nest and flew all round the cloud as it began the second verse of this song, and one bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment and then got up again. "Christopher, ow! Robin!" called out the cloud. "Yes?" "I've just been thinking, and I've come to a very important decision. These are the wrong sort of bees." "Are they?" "Quite the wrong sort. So I should think that they would make the wrong sort of honey, shouldn't you?" "Would they?" "Yes. So I think I shall come down." "How?" asked you. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he'd fall bump, and he didn't like the idea of that particularly. So he thought for a long time, and then he said, "Christopher Robin, you must shoot this balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun?" "Of course I have," you said. "But if I do that, it'll spoil the balloon," you said. "Yes, but if you don't," said Winnie the Pooh, "I should have to let go, and that'd spoil me." When he put it like this, you saw how it was, and you aimed very carefully at the balloon and fired. "Oh!" said Winnie the Pooh. "Did I miss?" you asked. "You didn't exactly miss," said Winnie the Pooh, "but you missed the balloon." "I'm so sorry," you said, and you fired again, and this time you hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding onto the string that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week, and whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to go pooh, so as to blow it off. And I think, but I'm not sure, that is why he was called Winnie the Pooh. "Is that the end of the story?" asked Christopher Robin. "That's the end of the story." Christopher Robin gave a deep sigh, picked up his bear by the leg and walked off to the door, trailing Winnie the Pooh behind him. And at the door he turned and said, "Coming to see me have my bath?" "I might," I said. "I didn't hurt him when I shot him, did I?" "Not a bit." He nodded and went out, and in a moment I heard Winnie the Pooh bump, 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 going up the stairs behind him.
Rose of Washington Square, a flower so fair, should blossom where the sun shines. Rose, for nature did not mean that you should blush unseen, but be the queen of some fair garden. Rose, I'll never depart, but live in your heart, your love to share. I'll bring the sunbeams from the heavens to you, and kisses that will sparkle with dew, my rose of Washington Square.
Rose,
You are my rose,
of Washington Square,
you are my rose,
a flower so fair,
you are my rose.
should blossom where the sun shines.
Rose for nature did not mean that you should blush unseen, but be the queen of some fair garden.
Rose,
You are my rose,
I'll never depart,
you are my rose,
but live in your heart,
you are my rose.
your love to share.
I'll bring the sunbeams from the heavens to you, and kisses that will sparkle with dew, my rose of Washington Square. My rose of Washington Square.
Winnie the Pooh Goes Visiting, an altogether alarming adventure. Mr. Edward Bear, known to his friends as Winnie the Pooh, was walking through the forest one day, humming proudly to himself. He had made up a little hum that morning as he was doing his exercises in front of the glass. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, as he stretched both paws above his head, and tra-la-la, tra-la-la, as he tried to reach his toes. After breakfast he had written it out and learnt it off by heart, and now he was humming it right through properly, and it went like this. Tra-la-la, 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 rum-tum, tiddle-lum-tum, tiddle-liddle, 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 diddle-diddle, rum-tum-tum, tiddle-lum. Well, he was humming this hum to himself and walking along gaily, wondering what everybody else was doing, and what it felt like being somebody else, when suddenly he came to a sandy bank, and in the bank was a large hole. "Ah," said Winnie the Pooh, rum-tum-tiddle-lum-tum. "If I know anything about anything, that hole means rabbits, and rabbits means company," he said, "and company means food, and listening to me humming, and such like. Rum-tum-tum-tiddle-rum." So he bent down, put his head into the hole, and called out, "Is anybody at home?" There was a sudden scuffling noise from inside the hole, and then silence. "What I said was, is anybody at home?" called out Winnie the Pooh very loudly.
"No," said a voice, and it added, "You needn't shout so loud, I heard you the first time."
"Bother," said Winnie the Pooh. "Isn't there anybody there at all?"
"Nobody."
Winnie the Pooh took his head out of the hole and thought for a little, and he thought to himself, "Somebody must have said nobody." So he put his head back in the hole and said, "Hello, Rabbit, is that you?"
"No,"
said Rabbit in a different voice this time. "But isn't that Rabbit's voice?"
"I don't think so,"
said Rabbit.
"It isn't meant to be."
"Oh, well, could you very kindly tell me where Rabbit is?"
"He's gone to see his friend Edward Bear, who is a great friend of his."
"But here I am," said Bear, very much surprised.
"Are you sure?"
said Rabbit, still more surprised. Quite sure," said Winnie the Pooh.
"Oh, well then, come in."
So Winnie the Pooh pushed and pushed and pushed his way through the hole, and at last he got in.
"You were quite right,"
said Rabbit, looking at him all over.
"It is you. Glad to see you."
"Who did you think it was?"
"Well, I wasn't quite sure. You know how it is in the forest. One can't have anybody coming into one's house. One has to be careful. What about a mouthful of something?"
Winnie the Pooh always liked a little something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was very glad to see Rabbit getting out the plates and mugs. And when Rabbit said,
"Honey or condensed milk with your bread?"
he was so excited that he said both. And then, so as not to seem greedy, he added, "But don't bother about the bread, please." And for a long time after that he said nothing, until at last, humming to himself in a rather sticky voice, he got up, shook Rabbit lovingly by the paw, and said that he must be going on.
"Well, goodbye," said Rabbit, "if you're sure you won't have any more."
"Is there any more?" asked Winnie the Pooh anxiously. Rabbit took the covers off the dishes and said, "No, there wasn't." "I thought not," said Winnie the Pooh, nodding to himself. "Well, goodbye. I must be going on." So he started to climb out of the hole. He pulled with his front paws and he pushed with his back paws, and a little while his nose was out in the open again, then his ears, and then his shoulders, and then... "Ooh, help!" said Winnie the Pooh. "Ooh, bother!" said Winnie the Pooh. "Ooh, I'm stuck!" said Winnie the Pooh. "Ooh, help and bother!" Now by this time Rabbit wanted to go for a walk too, and finding the front door full, he went out by the back door and came round to Winnie the Pooh and looked at him.
Hello, are you stuck?
He asked. "No," said Winnie the Pooh carelessly, "just resting and thinking and humming to myself."
Here, give us a paw.
Bear stretched out his paw and Rabbit pulled and pulled and pulled. "Ow!" cried Winnie the Pooh, "you're hurting."
"Fact is," said Rabbit, "you're stuck."
"It all comes," said Winnie the Pooh crossly, "of not having front doors big enough."
"It all comes," said Rabbit sternly, "of eating too much." "I thought at the time," said Rabbit, "only I didn't like to say anything," said Rabbit, "that one of us was eating too much," said Rabbit. "I knew it wasn't me," he said. Well, I shall go and fetch Christopher Robin."
Christopher Robin was a great friend of theirs who lived in the forest, and when he came back with Rabbit and saw the front half of Winnie the Pooh, he said, "Silly old bear," in such a loving voice that everyone felt quite hopeful again. "I was just beginning to think," said Bear, sniffing slightly, "that Rabbit might never be able to use his front door again, and I should hate that," he said.
"So should I," said Rabbit.
"Use his front door again?" said Christopher Robin. "Of course he'll use his front door again. Why, in a week from now—" "In a week," said Bear anxiously, "or 2 weeks. You see, we shall have to wait for you to get thin again." "But I can't stay here for a week." "You can stay here, all right, silly old bear. It's getting you out which is so difficult."
"We'll read to you," said Rabbit cheerfully. "And I hope it won't snow," he added. "And I say, old fellow, you're taking up a great deal of room in my house. Do you mind if I use your back legs as a towel horse? Because, I mean, there they are, doing nothing, and it would be very convenient to hang the towels on them."
"A week," said Winnie the Pooh gloomily. "What about meals?" "I'm afraid no meals," said Christopher Robin, "because of getting thin quicker. But we will read to you." Bear began to sigh, and then found he couldn't because he was so tightly stuck, and a tear rolled down from his eye as he said, "Then would you read a sustaining book such as would help and comfort a wedged bear in tightness?" So for a week Christopher Robin read that sort of book at one end of Winnie the Pooh, and Rabbit hung his washing on the other, and in between Bear felt himself getting slenderer and slenderer, and at the end of the week Christopher Robin said, "Now." So he took hold of Bear's front paws, Rabbit took hold of Christopher Robin, and all Rabbit's friends and relations took hold of Rabbit, and they all pulled together. And for a long time Bear said only, "Ow!" Then all of a sudden he said, "Pop!" just as if a cork were coming out of a bottle. And Christopher Robin and Rabbit and all Rabbit's friends and relations went head over heels backwards, and on top of them came Winnie the Pooh, free. So with a word of thanks to his friends, he went on with his walk through the forest, humming proudly to himself. But Christopher Robin looked after him lovingly and said to himself, "Silly old bear."
There's a rose that grows on no man's land, and it's wonderful to see. Though it's sprayed with tears, it will live for years in my garden of memory. It's the one red rose the soldier knows. of the master's hand. Mid the war's great curse stands the Red Cross nurse. She's the rose of no man's land. It's so wonderful to see. Though it's sprayed with tears, it will live for years in my garden of memory. It's the one red rose the soldier knows. It's the work of the master's hand. Mid the war's great curse stands the Red Cross nurse. She's the rose of no man's land.
Winnie the Pooh Goes Hunting. The piglet lived in a very grand house in the middle of a beech tree, and the beech tree was in the middle of the forest, and the piglet lived in the middle of the house. Over the front door was a piece of broken board which had Trespassers W on it. When Christopher Robin asked the piglet what it meant, he said it was his grandfather's name and had been in the family for a long time. Christopher Robin said you couldn't be called Trespassers W, and Piglet said yes you could, because his grandfather was, and it was short for Trespassers Will, which was short for Trespassers William. And his grandfather had had two names in case he lost one, Trespassers after an uncle, and William after Trespassers. I've got two names, said Christopher Robin carelessly.
Well, there you are, that proves it.
Said Piglet. One day Winnie the Pooh was walking round and round in a circle, thinking of something else, when he walked into Piglet.
Hello, said Piglet. What are you doing?
Hunting, said Winnie the Pooh.
Hunting what?
Tracking something, said Winnie the Pooh very mysteriously.
Tracking what? Said Piglet.
That's just what I asked myself. I asked myself, what?
What do you think you'll answer?
I shall have to wait until I catch up with it, said Winnie the Pooh. Now look there. He pointed to the ground in front of him. What do you see there?
Tracks,
Said Piglet.
paw marks.
He gave a little squeak of excitement.
Oh, Pooh, do you think it's a woozle?
It may be, said Pooh. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. You can never tell with paw marks. With these few words he went on tracking, and Piglet, after watching him for a minute or two, ran after him. Winnie the Pooh had come to a sudden stop and was bending over the tracks in a puzzled sort of way.
What's the matter?
Said Piglet. It's a very funny thing to be two animals now. This, whatever it was, is being joined by another whatever it is, and the two of them are now proceeding in company. Would you mind coming with me, Piglet, in case they turn out to be hostile animals? Piglet scratched his ear in a nice sort of way and said that he had nothing to do until Friday, and would be delighted to come in case it really was a woozle. You mean in case it really is two woozles, said Winnie the Pooh, and Piglet said that anyhow he had nothing to do until Friday, so off they went together. There was a small spinney of larch trees just here, and it seemed as if the two woozles, if that's what they were, had been going round this spinney. So round this spinney went Pooh and Piglet after them, Piglet passing the time by telling Pooh what his grandfather Trespassers W had done to remove stiffness after tracking, and how his grandfather Trespassers W had suffered in his later years from shortness of breath and other matters of interest, and Pooh wondering what a grandfather was like, and if perhaps this was two grandfathers they were after now, and if so, whether he would be allowed to take one home and keep it, and what Christopher Robin would say. And still the tracks went on in front of them. Suddenly Winnie the Pooh stopped and pointed excitedly in front of him. Look!
What?
said Piglet with a jump, and then, to show that he hadn't been frightened, he jumped up and down once or twice more in an exercising sort of way. "The tracks," said Pooh. "A third animal has joined the other two."
Bear, cried Piglet, do you think it's another woozle?
"No," said Pooh, "because it makes different marks. It's either two woozles and one, as it might be, whistle, or two, as it might be, whistles, and one, if so it is, woozle. Let us continue to follow them." So they went on, feeling just a little anxious now, in case the three animals in front of them were of hostile intent. And Piglet wished very much that his grandfather T.W. were there instead of elsewhere, and Pooh thought how nice it would be if they met Christopher Robin suddenly, but quite accidentally, and only because he liked Christopher Robin so much. And then, all of a sudden, Winnie the Pooh stopped again and licked the tip of his nose in a cooling manner, for he was feeling more hot and anxious than ever in his life before. There were 4 animals in front of them. "Do you see, Piglet? Look at their tracks. 3, as it were, woozles, and 1, as it was, whistle. Another woozle has joined them." And so it seemed to be. There were the tracks, crossing over each other here, getting muddled up with each other there, but quite plainly, every now and then, the tracks of 4 sets of paws. "I think," said Piglet, when he'd licked the tip of his nose too and found that it brought very little comfort, "I think that I've just remembered something. I've just remembered something that I forgot to do yesterday and shan't be able to do tomorrow. So I suppose I really ought to go back and do it now." "We'll do it this afternoon, and I'll come with you," said Pooh.
"It isn't the sort of thing you could do in the afternoon," said Piglet quickly. "It's a very particular morning thing that has to be done, and if possible between the hours of... what would you say the time was?"
"About 12, said Winnie the Pooh, looking at the sun.
"Between, as I was saying, the hours of 12 and 12:05. So really, dear old Bear, if you'll excuse me..." "What's that?"
Bear looked up at the sky, and then as he heard the whistle again, he looked up into the branches of a big oak tree, and then he saw a friend of his. "It's Christopher Robin," he said.
"Ah, then you'll be all right," said Piglet. "You'll be quite safe with him. Goodbye."
And he trotted off home quickly as he could, very glad to be out of all danger again. Christopher Robin came slowly down his tree. "Silly old Bear," he said, "what were you doing? First you went round the spinney twice by yourself, and then Piglet ran after you, and you went round again together, and then you were just going round a 4th time." "Wait a moment," said Winnie the Pooh, holding up his paw. He sat down and thought in the most thoughtful way he could think. Then he fitted his paw into one of the tracks, and then he scratched his nose twice and stood up. "Yes," said Winnie the Pooh. "I see now," said Winnie the Pooh. "I have been foolish and deluded," said he, "and I am a bear of no brain at all." "You are the best bear in the whole world," said Christopher Robin soothingly. "Am I?" said Winnie the Pooh hopefully, and then he brightened up suddenly. "Anyhow," he said, "it's nearly luncheon time." So he went home for it.
There's a song in the land of the lily, each sweetheart has heard with a sigh. Over high garden walls, the sweet echo falls, as a soldier boy whispers goodbye. Smile a while, you kiss me, sad adieu.